Hello, I'm Mary McCool-Berry, and I'm back for a new episode of Reading Swizzle. The information worth considering today comes from a chapter in E.D. Hirsch Jr.'s book, How to Educate a Citizen. And this chapter deals all about the Common Core. Hang with me. For those of you who don't know what the Common Core is, for those of you who hate the Common Core, and for those of you who think the Common Core could be improved upon, listen with me. Hirsch begins the chapter by thanking the numerous groups and organizations that came together to create the Common Core standards, which were adopted in 44 US states and 4 territories. However, the problem with the Common Core, as he points out, is the Common Core standards have had a negligible effect on our performance, students' performance in reading, math, and science. So what can we do? Hirsch argues that we put more meat on these standards, and it's essential because the standards have not helped the great majority, including those who are most disadvantaged. So what are the Common Core standards? A friend of mine said, show, don't tell, and I value her advice. So I'd like to share with you the 5th grade Common Core standards that many states are still using. And I'd like to use these to illustrate my point. Okay, for those of you listening on the podcast, I will read some of these. So this is 5th grade reading standards for information text. Now, I want to see if we can find any content in these standards. Can you find any specificity? Why is content and specific standards, why is it so important? Well, here is information text. The first sub-step standard: quote accurately from a text when explaining what the text says explicitly and when drawing inferences from the text. It doesn't say which text, what we're learning in this informational text. It doesn't even give any teachers any kind of roadmap on how students are supposed to draw inferences. Analyze informational text development. So you determine the main ideas, what are the key details. Provide a summary of the text that includes the main ideas and key details, as well as other important information. So my curiosity would lead me then to, what are the writing standards? How do we teach summary writing? Craft and structure. Determine the meaning of general academic and domain-specific words and phrases in a text relevant to a grade 5 topic or subject area. What is the problem with that? Every single state in our great union will be teaching different domain-specific and academic specific topics. We're all over the place. And the next one is compare and contrast the overall structure. The last one I'm going to talk about is analyze multiple accounts of the same event or topic. What is the event or topic? There is nothing specific in any place of the Common Core standards. There is no specific content that is outlined. Why is this important? Shared knowledge, Hirsch asserts, creates a shared nation. And we need shared knowledge in our elementary schools in order to sustain this United States. Why? When people all understand the background, they have a common knowledge. It's a speech community. Yesterday, I was watching Jeopardy, and they had a sports category. I don't follow sports. So the sports they had were cricket and rugby, and they were specific terms used in those sports. They even had golf, which I thought, I'm somewhat familiar with golf, but I would not have been able to understand any part of what they were talking about with regards to cricket or rugby or even golf, because I didn't know the content, the key vocabulary words. The topics cannot be chosen randomly. So you see in the Common Core, teachers are given a wide berth to choose whatever topics they might deem fit to address those Common Core standards. And the result is teachers in grade levels could be teaching very different things in the same building. So they have to be specific, and they have to be sequenced. What does a good elementary curriculum look like? Well, it should have coherence over time. So the knowledge builds from year to year. What you learn in kindergarten, then you can build upon it in first grade, second grade, all the way through 8th grade. That's called cumulative learning. There's a commonality and an equity, and the reason is everyone understands because you are sharing knowledge about the same concept or topic. So there is a speech community. And it has to be specific enough in order to ensure commonality. So I was a teacher that really believed in hands-on learning. And as I've mentioned before, I did a lot of this Carolina Biological Smithsonian science project process-based learning. So my interpretation of life cycle of animals might be to teach butterflies in 2nd grade. But our curriculum director might say, no. That needs to be in 3rd grade or 4th grade. And other schools might be doing something completely different or not at all. So what was happening in my classroom for 32 years might not have been happening in another school across the district, because we were allowed to interpret those Common Core standards. So which country is #1 on the International Students Assessment? Well, PISA is a test that assesses 15-year-olds across the world. And the 2023 rankings have the United States at 25. We're 25th in the world. PISA looks at reading, math, and science. It's not a composite score. So who's #1? Well, in 2023, it was China. But we have some reason to believe that we should look more carefully at who took the test, how the test was administered. This country that has been consistently #1 is, take a guess, Singapore. I want to show you a short video clip. And in this video clip and on the podcast, you should be able to hear this. The American Federation of Teachers, Randy Weingarten, went to Singapore to find out, and this was a while ago, but find out what in the world are they doing in Singapore. So once again, I share my screen. And just a moment. Why education in Singapore works.
World-leading education system.
So, Randy, nice to see you. With the world becoming much smaller and more globally competitive, we are looking at what's going on in education throughout the globe and to see where things are being done well and what we can replicate in the United States. Looking at the PISA results, you see certain countries who outcompete America. Countries like Finland and Ontario, Canada, and countries like Singapore, where we are in right now. And what's remarkable about the places that outcompete America, they focus on collaborative environments where kids and teachers can thrive, and they focus on building the best professional class of teachers one can.
Teachers are the heart of education, and the institute that trains the teachers, it is the heart of the whole education system.
The National Institute of Education trains all teachers in the Singapore school system. Top-performing students are selected for specific subjects and teaching positions and are given a rigorous 21st century training to prepare them for a lifelong career.
We are always open to look at new areas, new domains, with the total ultimate focus is how do we prepare a better teacher such that he or she can bring the best education to the students in the classroom. See, we just had a service learning day where many, as we walk around and see the campus, it will just...
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. Singapore educates approximately 5.6 million people. It's a multiracial, multicultural country, but they have a balance of content, mastery, and skills. Interestingly, there is one publisher. It's the Marshall Cavendish Education publisher, and they have an approved textbook list. To this YouTube video, I will attach the sites where you can reference these. So in Singapore's philosophy is this, and I quote, "You must teach this single textbook and its coherent, specific content. It mandates one single, well-written series, year by year, of textbook, which every school child in the country must be taught." Let's compare that to the US. In the US, educational publishers will put out an all call on Craigslist or freelance job boards, and it's about writing about something like the American Revolution. Some of this subject matter is vetted by experts, subject matter experts or teachers, but oftentimes it isn't. The books are quickly produced, full of mistakes, and it's more profitable for publishing companies to churn these out year after year. Hirsch states quite correctly, "These financial motivations we must be skeptical of." He quotes, "With the financial motivations of the educational companies and the unwillingness of government leaders to do anything to impose an explicit plan for education, how could we ever achieve the high degree of coherence and specificity necessary for excellence and fairness?" So the publishing companies and education have financial considerations, and they're in a business. Our government leaders are hands off. Let's let every state do their job. That's why it's so remarkable that the Common Core standards were even formulated. I don't like them because they don't provide a good roadmap. There is no specificity or content. Hirsch says we need the United States has to form a coalition or states individually and specify a grade by grade sequence. So when I first started teaching in our district, I was given a curriculum. So a curriculum for science, a curriculum for social studies, etc. Unfortunately, our current educators are adhering to this progressive tradition of the romantic notion that children will learn by osmosis, that they will take in information that they glean naturally. And this is not the truth. People have really been vocal against E.D. Hirsch Jr. and his ideas because they think it's thought control. They're worried that this broad knowledge requirement would lead to thought control. And he says, no, it leads to less. There's less danger of thought control. There are technical reasons that Singapore scores near the top. They know more. It's not thought control. So broad knowledge is spread widely and democratically in Singapore. If you were to group of 15-year-olds and ask them to take a proficiency test in reading, math, or science, they would perform well despite their economic level of their parents and their caregivers. So if you have a content-rich curriculum like Singapore does, you do not need standards because the content is already outlined. But as I showed you, in our Common Core standards, you can teach anything you like. That's why we are so far off the reservation. Text, so Hirsch goes further to say text complexity is not a scientifically valid criterion. Why? If students understand the subject matter, the text complexity is going to be much easier for them to comprehend. For example, if I were given a technical manual or a skills manual on rugby or cricket or golf, I wouldn't do well because I would be really slowed down because I don't have the prerequisite background knowledge. So the text simplicity so something very simple like a manual about golf, it would be difficult. So what does topic commonality have going for it? Science shows it works. The data shows it works. And the proof of the concept. But the problem is it lacks adherence because of those who administer in our schools, and they're trained, as I said before, under this late 20th century romantic idea that children are just immersed into the environment and therefore pick up key concepts. So the purpose of information worth considering in Reading Swizzle is to persuade you to take a look at something different. Let's go back to the Singapore video for just a few moments.
Demonstrate to you how the government view in terms of its importance of teacher education. In Singapore, where the square foot of land is equated to gold and diamonds, and here the government will give us 16 hectares devoted to teacher education and teacher development.
So in your wall diary, I would like you to write it very personally. Some of them, they actually recreated a timeline, so they're actually contributing to the class.
What was his inner thoughts? So you're really trying to get his perspective of what he was thinking about.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fantastic. Kids in this school are joyful. They like being here. But equally important is what the teachers are doing. In every classroom we go into, teachers can explain what they're doing, why they're doing it, and the connection between what they're doing and the learning that kids are accomplishing.
What if we have one bar that is longer? What does it mean?
And in seeing the math classes, we're starting to see a really interesting pedagogical method. It's about visualization as opposed to memorization, and about kids actually engaging in creating blocks to see what's more and what's less.
They've actually just figured out that the bars are relative to each other, so they are not absolute.
You also see as part of this a real focus on language immersion, so that kids are understanding what more than means, what fewer than means, things like that.
In Singapore, there is a recognition that post-secondary education is important for all students, not only the top performers. the state-of-the-art Institute of Technical Education involves businesses in shaping their curriculum, preparing students for real-world employment prospects.
They extract the enzyme and work on this to work out and come up with a washing detergent. And they pick up some basic skills either in enterprise or entrepreneurship. Whether they go to work for someone else, they understand how business operate and will be able to contribute more to the organization they work with.
Okay, I'm going to come back. So the Common Core, how do we start with that as a possible base? Well, Hirsch recommends that we start with non-political organizations. And all over our country, we're having disagreements and very heated arguments about the content being taught in our elementary schools. States must create a very explicit set of topics that's sequenced in all subject areas. All subject areas. It's taught in the elementary school, and you can take advantage, he says, of the curriculum that he has already created, and it is free on the Core Knowledge site. He also asks that state governors take a stand in backing this and carrying out the initiative. And I am so proud of my home state of Ohio, in which Governor DeWine has legislation pending, which would require school districts to teach phonics. And this is a great step in the right direction. However, phonics isn't the whole story. As a reading and dyslexia specialist with decades of experience, more needs to be taught than just phonics. But guess what? So many publishers eliminated phonics from their reading programs in what we call whole language or balanced literacy. There's another country that is of particular note, and that is Canada. Canada rates highly in the PISA rankings. And it's not because it's the language arts is not a separate skill. They teach specific subject areas. So what's the big opposition to Hirsch's ideas? Well, he's found from considerable backlash that people are worried about political control. The Democrats are pushing their agenda. The Republicans will push their agenda. Others worry about thought control. Teachers might worry that it deprives freedom of choice, or this lockstep uniformity results in less creativity and independence. And because I work with children every day, they are my reason for waking up in the morning. I know that if you taught specific content to them, they would become so immersed in the topic, in school, in exploring all different tentacles off of that content. I know it to be true because I'm doing it each day. Hirsch says people like my own parents who were born in the first half of the 20th century. My father was born in 1932 and my mother was born in 1940. They learned US history. They learned the Declaration of Independence. They learned how to write. They learned parts of speech. And Hirsch has said that he also grew up in this time period, that people accuse him of, that's just learning a bunch of useless facts. But he contends those learners in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s, they turned out to be really good readers. He also points out that he grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and all around him, racial discrimination and segregation was roaring. But he was able to read well enough this book, An American Dilemma by Gunnar Myrdal. And he said, it really opened my eyes to all of this discrimination and segregation happening all around him. Furthermore, The scores in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s were the top, we had the top verbal scores internationally. Right now, we have, people don't believe me, we have 40% of the US population who is low literate or illiterate. 40%. And we have all this funding, taxpayers, funding to the schools. So why? If we're pouring so much money into our education system, why do we have such miserable results? And the people that are really hurting are the ones who are low income, who are minority, people who don't have access to what my own sons grew up with. And I want to make a point that my dad used to say. I would ask him when I was in middle school, how do you know that? And he said, I read. He said, what are they teaching you in school? The educational experience from my mother and my father was vastly different than my own. So this is a question that I'd like you to consider. How can massive change for the better as a civil rights movement be accomplished except by people who are intellectually and socially competent? My question, that's Hirsch's question. Are students exiting high school, are they intellectually and socially competent? What do they know? How do they apply that knowledge? The people who oppose the idea of core knowledge is, they said it's easy. It's easy for a demagogue to lead us sheep-like. So actually, I want to correct myself. We are led like sheep if we don't have a common basis of knowledge. Hirsch, and I quote, says the demonization of the other in our politics is the result of ignorance and living by slogan. Build back better. Make America great. What does that mean? I am a lifelong Democrat, as I've said, and this doesn't have anything to do with politics, but I will be registering as an independent because I believe that these ideas are getting lost in all of this vitriol that's exchanged daily. Big questions. Who decides what we all should know? And Hirsch said, the majority should decide, as is normal in a democracy. You have to make sure that the process and the results are fully public. On my LinkedIn page, I just recently posted the Right to Read film, and it was interesting because one of the quotes in the film is, parents don't know. And that's true. Parents are busy raising their children, going to their work, putting food on the table, and keeping it all together. But we need public support for changing the instructional program so it looks American, but it has some of the same tenets as Singapore and Canada and other high-performing nations. 25th is not acceptable. 25th in the international rankings for 2023. Teachers, I don't know if you caught this, but the teacher knowledge in Singapore, they have a massive training center, and the teachers must demonstrate knowledge of a specific subject, not pedagogical technique. So we have to do a better job training our teachers, as I've discussed in every episode. So Hirsch concludes this chapter about the Common Core and what we can do to kind of to manipulate it so it can work in this 21st century, and we do a better job with all American students, regardless of where they come from. He writes, the French have this quote, "The long distance is nothing. The first step is what's hard." So I urge all government leaders, especially state leaders, to go beyond the phonics part. And I believe it's really important to start looking at what we teach grade by grade in the elementary school. I will include links to Singapore's curriculum and to the publishing company. They only have one publishing company, as I mentioned, the Marshall Cavendish publishing company. But, you know, I was telling my 20-something-year-old son that many people don't even know about Singapore math. He had never heard of it, and he's an engineer. So we need to get the word out and spread, because all children in America matter. All children in the world matter. And I believe that we have to be teaching them something. So my name is Mary McCool-Berry. This is Reading Swizzle, and information worth considering. Thank you for your time.